The courtroom was packed that Tuesday morning. Everyone wanted to see how this case would end. Robert sat in the back row, his hands shaking as he gripped the wooden bench in front of him. He had been coming to this trial every single day for the past 3 weeks, watching his best friend stand trial for something he didn't do. James stood at the defendant's table in his gray suit, looking tired and defeated. The prosecution had just finished their closing arguments and things looked bad. Really bad. They had bank statements, email records, and documents that all pointed to one person. James. According to them, he had stolen over $2 million from the software company he and Robert had started together 5 years ago. Robert remembered when they first opened that company. 2 friends with a dream and a laptop. They had worked 18-hour days, sleeping in the office, eating cheap takeout, building something from nothing. They hired good people, people who believed in their vision. They had investors who trusted them with their money. And now all of it was gone. The prosecutor was good at her job. She had laid out every piece of evidence like she was building a brick wall, forged signatures on transfer documents, secret bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, encrypted messages that seemed to show James planning the whole thing. When she showed the jury those bank statements with James's name on them, Robert had watched several jurors shake their heads in disgust. James had tried to defend himself. His lawyer had done his best, but what can you do when the evidence is so overwhelming? James kept saying he was innocent, that he had no idea where that money went, that someone must have set him up. But who would believe that? It sounded like something from a movie, not real life. Judge Patricia Harrison was known for being tough but fair. She had silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and wore reading glasses that sat low on her nose. She had been patient throughout the trial, listening to every witness, examining every document. But even she seemed convinced. Robert could see it in the way she looked at James. The defense attorney made his final plea. He talked about James's character, his years of service to the community, his clean record. He reminded the jury that in America everyone is innocent until proven guilty. But his voice lacked conviction. Even he seemed to know it was over. Robert's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. He had been carrying this weight for so long. 3 years of lying. 3 years of watching his best friend's life fall apart while he stayed silent. 3 years of living in a prison of his own making. The judge looked at her notes. She cleared her throat and adjusted her glasses. This was it. This was the moment she would deliver her verdict. In just a few seconds, James would be convicted of crimes he didn't commit. He would go to prison for 10, maybe 15 years. His wife would leave him. His kids would grow up without a father. His name would be ruined forever, and it would all be Robert's fault. Robert tried to stand up twice before he actually made it to his feet. His legs felt like rubber. The whole courtroom seemed to tilt sideways. He grabbed the bench in front of him to steady himself. "Your Honor," he said, but his voice came out as barely a whisper. Nobody heard him. The judge was still looking at her papers. The attorneys were shuffling their documents. James was standing with his head bowed, waiting for his life to end. "Your Honor," Robert said louder this time. A few heads turned. The bailiff took a step toward him. The judge looked up from her papers, her eyes narrowing. "Sir, sit down," she said firmly. This is not the time for outbursts, but Robert couldn't sit down. If he sat down now, he would never stand up again. The guilt would crush him completely. He thought about his daughter, about what he had done for her, about the choice he had made. And he thought about James standing there about to pay for Robert's crimes. "Please, Your Honor," Robert said, his voice shaking. "I need to speak. I need to tell you something important." The judge's face turned red. She picked up her gavel. "Sir, if you do not sit down immediately, I will hold you in contempt of court. Bailiff, please remove this man." The bailiff started walking toward Robert. James turned around looking confused. He saw Robert standing there and their eyes met. In that moment, something passed between them. Some understanding. Some recognition. "James didn't steal that money," Robert said quickly before the bailiff could reach him. The words tumbled out of his mouth like water breaking through a dam. "He didn't do any of this. I know he didn't because—" He took a deep breath. This was it. The moment everything would change. The moment he would lose everything he had left. But he couldn't stop now. "I know he didn't steal it because I did. I took the money, all of it. James is innocent." The courtroom exploded. Everyone started talking at once. The prosecutor jumped to her feet, shouting objections. James's lawyer looked like someone had hit him with a brick. The judge was banging her gavel so hard Robert thought it might break. "Order," she shouted. "Order in this court." But nobody was listening. The reporters in the back were already on their phones. The jury members were looking at each other in shock. James's wife had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. James just stood there staring at Robert. His face showed so many emotions at once: shock, confusion, anger, relief, betrayal, hope. The bailiff grabbed Robert's arm. "Sir, you need to come with me." "Wait," the judge said. She had stopped banging her gavel. The courtroom slowly went quiet. Everyone wanted to hear what would happen next. Judge Harrison looked at Robert for a long moment. Her face was impossible to read. Finally, she spoke. "Sir, do you understand what you just said? Do you understand the implications of this accusation?" Robert nodded. His whole body was shaking now, but his voice was steady. "Yes, Your Honor, I understand completely. And I'm ready to tell you everything." The judge looked at the prosecutor, then at James's attorney, then back at Robert. She took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes. In all her years on the bench, she had never seen anything like this. "Bailiff, bring that man forward," she said. "And somebody call the DA's office. We're going to need more people here." This trial just became a lot more complicated. As Robert walked toward the front of the courtroom, he felt strange. Terrified, yes, but also lighter somehow, like he had been carrying an enormous weight and had finally set it down. Whatever happened next, at least he wouldn't have to watch an innocent man go to prison for his crimes. He glanced at James one more time. His former best friend's face was unreadable. Robert wondered if James would ever forgive him. Probably not. How could he? But at least James would be free. At least his children would still have their father. At least one good thing would come from all of this. The judge was arranging papers on her desk, preparing for what came next. The prosecutor was on her phone, speaking rapidly. The reporters were typing away on their laptops. And in the middle of it all, Robert stood and waited to tell the truth he should have told 3 years ago. The judge had Robert sworn in right there at the witness stand. His hand shook as he placed it on the Bible. He had never been religious, but in that moment he felt the weight of what he was about to do. Telling the truth under oath meant there was no going back, no changing his mind, no escape. "State your name for the record," the court reporter said. "Robert Chen," he said quietly. "Speak up, please," Judge Harrison instructed. "Robert Chen," he repeated louder. The prosecutor, a woman named Linda Martinez, stood up. She looked angry and confused at the same time. "Your Honor, I object to this entire proceeding. This is highly irregular. We have no idea what this man is about to say, and he could be lying to protect the defendant." Judge Harrison nodded. "I understand your concern, counselor. But this man just confessed to a crime in my courtroom. I have an obligation to hear what he has to say. We'll sort out the truth afterward. Please proceed, Mr. Chen. Tell us exactly what you mean when you say you took the money." Robert looked out at the courtroom. Every eye was on him. James was sitting now, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. James's wife was in the front row, crying quietly. Robert's own seat in the back was empty. There was no one here for him. He had made sure of that. 3 years ago, Robert began, my daughter Sophie was diagnosed with leukemia. She was only 7 years old. He paused, his throat tight. Even now, even after everything, talking about Sophie was hard. The doctor said she needed treatment. Special treatment. There was this experimental program at a hospital in Boston. They had seen good results with her type of cancer. But our insurance wouldn't cover it. They said it was too experimental, too expensive, too risky. The courtroom was completely silent now. Even the prosecutor had sat down, listening. The treatment cost almost $2 million. $2 million. I had maybe $30,000 in savings. I took out a second mortgage on our house. I sold my car. I borrowed from everyone I knew. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't even close, Robert's voice cracked. He took a sip of water from the glass on the witness stand. I was desperate. Sophie was getting worse every day. The doctor said if we didn't start treatment soon, it would be too late. My wife was falling apart. My son, he was only 5. He didn't understand why his sister was so sick. I felt like I was drowning and nobody could help me. James was staring at him now, and Robert could see understanding starting to dawn on his face. But there was something else there too, something that looked like sadness. I started looking at the company accounts. James and I had built the business together. We were partners 50-50. But I handled most of the financial side. I had access to everything, the business accounts, the investor money, all of it. At first, I thought I could just borrow it, take the money, save Sophie, and then pay it back somehow. I know that sounds stupid now, but when your child is dying, you don't think straight. You just think about saving them, no matter what it costs. The prosecutor was taking notes now, her pen moving rapidly across her legal pad. So I started moving money, small amounts at first, 10,000 here, 20,000 there. I set up a bank account in the Cayman Islands under a fake company name. I routed the money through 3 different banks so it would be hard to trace. I used my access to the company's financial systems to cover my tracks. Robert looked directly at James. But I knew that eventually, someone would notice. The company was growing. We had investors who looked at our books. We had accountants who did audits. I knew I couldn't hide it forever. That's when I made the worst decision of my life. I decided to make it look like James did it. James closed his eyes. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder. I had access to James's email. He had given me his passwords years ago, back when we first started the company. We trusted each other completely. I used that trust to destroy him. Robert's voice was flat now, emotionless. He was stating facts, nothing more. I created fake emails from James to offshore banks. I forged his signature on transfer documents. I set up accounts in his name. I even planted evidence in his home office during a dinner party at his house. While everyone was eating, I went upstairs and put fake bank statements in his desk drawer. Statements that made it look like he had been stealing from the company for years. Why? Judge Harrison asked. It was the question everyone wanted answered. Why would you frame your best friend? Why not just take the money and disappear? Robert shook his head. Because I couldn't disappear. Sophie needed me. She needed her father. And I thought if I made it look like James did it, I could stay with my family. I could be there for Sophie during her treatment. I never thought James would actually get arrested. I thought maybe he would just get fired or sued. I didn't think it would go this far. That's a lie, the prosecutor said, standing up. Your Honor, this is clearly a fabricated story to save the defendant. There's no proof of any of this. Robert reached into his jacket pocket. The bailiff tensed, but Robert slowly pulled out a USB drive. There's proof, Robert said. On this drive, there's everything. Every transaction I made, every fake email I created, security footage from our office showing me accessing James's computer after hours. I kept it all. I don't know why. Maybe I knew that one day I would need to tell the truth. The judge motioned to the bailiff, who took the USB drive and handed it to her. She looked at it, then at Robert. Continue your story, Mr. Chen. What happened with your daughter? This was the part Robert had been dreading. The part that still made him wake up screaming in the middle of the night. The treatment didn't work, he said simply. Sophie went through 6 months of experimental therapy in Boston. The doctors tried everything, but the cancer was too aggressive. She died 4 months ago. There were gasps from the courtroom. Even the prosecutor looked shocked. James's wife was crying harder now. After Sophie died, everything fell apart. My wife blamed me. She said I had spent all that money, destroyed our lives, and for what? Our daughter was still gone. She took our son and moved to her mother's house in California. She filed for divorce. I don't blame her. I blame myself. Robert wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I tried to kill myself twice, once with pills. My neighbor found me and called an ambulance. The second time I was standing on a bridge. A police officer talked me down. They put me in a psychiatric hospital for a month. When I got out, I had nothing left. No daughter, no wife, no son, no job, no money, just guilt. And you watched James get arrested, get put on trial, lose everything too? The judge asked. Her voice wasn't angry. It was sad, yes, Robert said. I watched it all happen, and every day I told myself I would confess tomorrow. Tomorrow I would tell the truth. But tomorrow kept coming and I kept being a coward. I was already in hell. I thought at least I could keep James out of prison. His lawyer kept telling him to take a plea deal, 5 years instead of 15. But James refused. He kept saying he was innocent, that he didn't do it. Robert looked at James again. That's when I knew I had to tell the truth. James was going to prison for a crime he didn't commit. And he wasn't even going to try to make a deal to reduce his sentence. He was going to take the full punishment for my crime, because he actually believed the truth would come out. He believed in justice that much. The courtroom was silent for a long moment. Then James stood up. His lawyer tried to pull him back down, but James shook him off. "Your Honor," James said. His voice was steady but full of emotion. "May I say something?" Judge Harrison looked at him. "This is highly irregular, but given the circumstances, yes, you may speak." James walked toward the witness stand where Robert sat. The bailiff moved to stop him, but the judge waved him off. "You should have told me," James said to Robert. His voice broke. "About Sophie. About the money. About everything. We were brothers, Rob. I would have helped you. I would have given you everything I had. We could have mortgaged the business, taken out loans, asked the investors for help. We could have saved her together." Robert was crying now, tears streaming down his face. I know I should have. But I was scared and stupid and desperate. I thought I could handle it alone. I thought I was protecting you. Protecting me." James's voice rose. "You destroyed my life to protect me? I lost my job. My reputation. My wife almost left me. My kids were bullied at school because their dad was a thief. Do you know what that did to them? Do you know what it did to me?" "I know," Robert sobbed. "I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. There's nothing I can say that will make this right. Nothing I can do to fix what I broke. But I couldn't let you go to prison. I couldn't do that to you. Not when you're innocent." James stood there for a moment looking at his former best friend. Then he turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I want him prosecuted. To the full extent of the law. What he did was wrong. Not just the theft, but the betrayal. The lies, the frame-up. All of it. He needs to face consequences." Judge Harrison nodded slowly. "I understand, Mr. Sullivan. And I assure you there will be consequences. Bailiff, please take Mr. Chen into custody. He's confessed to multiple felonies in my courtroom today." As the bailiff handcuffed Robert, he felt that strange sense of relief again. It was finally over. The lying. The hiding. The guilt. He was going to prison, but at least James would be free. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said, standing up again. "I need time to verify all of this. The evidence, the confession, everything. This changes the entire case." "Agreed," the judge said. "This trial is suspended pending a full investigation. Mr. Sullivan, you're free to go while we sort this out. Mr. Chen, you'll be held without bail until we can verify your story and determine appropriate charges." As they led Robert out of the courtroom, he looked back one more time at James. Their eyes met. Robert wanted to say something, anything. But what was there to say? Sorry wasn't enough. It would never be enough. James just stared at him. And in that stare, Robert saw everything. The friendship they'd had. The trust he'd destroyed. The pain he'd caused. And maybe, just maybe, underneath all that anger and hurt, a tiny bit of the brother James used to be. The county jail was nothing like Robert had imagined. He had seen movies, of course, but being there was different. The smell of disinfectant and sweat. The constant noise. The cold metal bench in the holding cell. He sat there for 6 hours before they processed him and gave him an orange jumpsuit. The other men in his cell didn't talk to him much at first. There was an older man who kept muttering to himself, a young kid who looked barely 20, and a large man with tattoos covering his arms who just stared at the wall. Robert found a corner and sat down, his back against the cold concrete. He thought about what he had done in that courtroom. Part of him still couldn't believe he had actually stood up and confessed. For 3 years he had kept that secret locked inside, 3 years of lying to everyone, including himself. And then in one moment he had let it all out. His court-appointed lawyer came to see him the next day, a tired-looking woman in her 40s named Patricia Wong. She sat across from him in the small visiting room and opened her briefcase. "Mr. Chen," she said, "you've put me in a very difficult position. You confessed to multiple felonies in open court. There's no good way to defend that." "I don't want you to defend it," Robert said. "I did everything I said I did. I just want to make sure James is cleared. That's all that matters now." Patricia sighed. "I understand you feel guilty. But my job is to defend you whether you want me to or not. The DA is taking this very seriously. They're talking about charging you with embezzlement, fraud, identity theft, and obstruction of justice. You could be looking at 20 years. 20 years. Robert had turned 42 last month. He would be 62 when he got out, if he got out. His son would be a grown man. Sophie would have been in her 20s. But Sophie was gone, and that was why they were all here in the first place. "I deserve it," Robert said quietly. "Maybe," Patricia said, "but that's not for you to decide. That's for a judge and jury to decide. Now let's talk about the evidence you mentioned. The USB drive. What's on it? Over the next hour, Robert explained everything in detail. How he had set up the fake accounts. How he had forged James's signatures using software he had designed himself. How he had hacked into James's email by installing a keylogger on his computer during a late night at the office. Every step of his plan, every detail of his betrayal. Patricia took notes, her pen scratching across her legal pad. When he finished, she sat back in her chair. This is bad, Mr. Chen. Really bad. But I have to ask you something. Why did you keep all this evidence? Most criminals try to destroy proof of their crimes. You kept detailed records of everything you did. Why? Robert had thought about this question many times during his month in the psychiatric hospital. The therapist there had asked him the same thing. I think part of me always knew I would confess, he said. I'm not a criminal. I'm not a bad person. At least I wasn't before all this. I kept the evidence because I knew that one day I would need to prove the truth. I couldn't let James go to prison. That was always my line. I could live with a lot of things, but not that. Patricia nodded slowly. That's going to be important. It shows remorse. It shows that you always intended to tell the truth eventually. We can use that. Meanwhile, outside the jail, the investigation was moving fast. The FBI had gotten involved because the money had crossed state lines and international borders. Special Agent David Torres was assigned to the case. He was a forensic accountant who specialized in white-collar crime. Torres and his team took the USB drive and started verifying everything Robert had claimed. They traced every transaction, examined every email, reviewed every document. They also looked at security footage from the office building where Robert and James had their company. What they found was exactly what Robert had said. There was footage of Robert entering the office at 2 a.m, weeks before the money started disappearing. They could see him sitting at James's desk, typing on James's computer. They found the keylogger software installed on James's machine, with a timestamp that matched when Robert had access. The bank accounts in the Cayman Islands were registered to a shell company, but the IP addresses used to set them up traced back to Robert's home computer. The emails that had seemed to come from James were actually sent from a spoofed email address that mimicked James's. But the technical details showed they originated from Robert's devices. Agent Torres had been doing this work for 15 years. He had seen a lot of criminals try to frame other people, but he had never seen someone keep such detailed records of their own crimes. It was like Robert had been building a case against himself the whole time. This guy wanted to get caught, Torres said to his partner as they reviewed the evidence. Nobody keeps records this detailed unless they want someone to find them eventually. The most damaging piece of evidence was something Robert had mentioned but Torres hadn't expected to find. Videos. Robert had used security cameras in the office to record himself doing everything. Accessing James's computer, printing fake documents, even putting the fake bank statements in James's home office during that dinner party. He filmed himself committing the crimes, Torres's partner said, shaking her head. I've never seen anything like this. But there was more to the story. As Torres dug deeper, he found the medical records, Sophie Chen's diagnosis, the hospital bills, the rejected insurance claims, the desperate emails Robert had sent to the experimental treatment center in Boston, begging them to accept his daughter into their program. Torres read through Sophie's medical file. She had been a beautiful little girl with dark hair and big brown eyes. The photos showed her before the cancer, smiling at a birthday party, and then during treatment, pale and thin, wearing a princess costume in the hospital. The last photo was from her funeral, a small white coffin covered in pink roses. Torres had 3 daughters of his own. He sat at his desk for a long time looking at those photos. What would he do if one of his daughters got sick? If she needed treatment that cost $2 million? Would he steal? Would he lie? Would he betray his best friend? He wanted to say no. He wanted to believe he would find another way. But sitting there looking at that little girl's face, he wasn't sure anymore. This is a tough one, he told his supervisor. The evidence is clear. Robert Chen did everything he confessed to. But the motive, it's hard not to feel for the guy. His supervisor nodded. I get it. But he didn't just steal money. He framed an innocent man. He let that man get arrested, go to trial, face prison. That's not just theft. That's malicious, Torres agreed. The law was clear. Robert had committed serious crimes. The fact that he had a sympathetic reason didn't change that. But it might change how he was sentenced. The DA's office was having similar conversations. Linda Martinez, the prosecutor from James's trial, was now working on Robert's case. She had worked with the FBI to verify all the evidence and everything checked out. Robert was guilty. No question about it. But the case was complicated by public opinion. The story had hit the news hard. Father steals to save dying daughter, frames best friend was the headline in the local paper. The comments online were divided. Some people called Robert a monster. Others called him a desperate father who made a terrible mistake. Martinez didn't care about public opinion. Her job was to prosecute crimes, not to be popular, but she knew the judge would care. Judges were elected in their state, and they paid attention to public sentiment. She decided to charge Robert with everything she could. Embezzlement, fraud, identity theft, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. The charges carried a maximum sentence of 25 years in prison. Back in jail, Robert was struggling. Not with the other inmates or the conditions. He could handle that. What he couldn't handle was the visits from his ex-wife. Helen came to see him a week after his confession. She looked older than he remembered. Her hair had more gray in it. There were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. The divorce wasn't final yet, but they hadn't spoken in months. She sat down across from him, separated by thick glass. They picked up the phones. "I saw the news," she said. Her voice was flat, emotionless. "I'm sorry," Robert said. It was all he seemed to say anymore. "You should have told me," Helen said. "About the money. About what you were doing. I'm your wife, Robert. I was your wife. We were supposed to face things together. I wanted to protect you," Robert said. "I didn't want you to know what I was doing. I didn't want you to be part of it. So instead, you let me think you were having a breakdown. Let me think you were crazy. I spent months trying to help you, trying to understand why you were acting so strange. And the whole time you were lying to me." Robert had no defense. She was right. He had lied to everyone, his wife, his friend, himself. "Sophie needed that treatment," he said weakly. "And it didn't work." Helen's voice rose. The guard at the door looked over. She took a breath and lowered her voice. "It didn't work, Robert. She died anyway. And now you're in jail. James's life was destroyed. Our family is destroyed. And for what? Sophie is still gone." Those words cut deeper than anything else could have, because she was right. He had sacrificed everything, destroyed everyone around him, and Sophie had died anyway. It had all been for nothing. "I know," he whispered. "Tom asks about you," Helen said after a moment. Tom was their son, now 8 years old. "He doesn't understand why you're not home. He doesn't understand any of this." "What do you tell him?" "I tell him that Daddy made some mistakes and he has to go away for a while." "What else can I say? How do I explain to an 8-year-old that his father is a criminal, that he stole money and lied and destroyed another family?" Robert put his hand on the glass. Helen looked at it but didn't touch her side. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said, "for what you did, for the lying, for shutting me out when we should have been dealing with Sophie's illness together, for making all these decisions without me, for destroying James, for all of it." "I don't expect you to forgive me," Robert said. "I don't forgive myself." Helen stood up. "I have to go. The lawyer wants to finalize the divorce papers. I'm going to tell Tom that you love him, because I think you do in your own broken way. But I don't think I can bring him here. I don't think he should see you like this." She hung up the phone and walked away. Robert sat there for a long time, holding the dead phone, watching through the glass as the woman he loved disappeared from his life. That night, lying on his thin mattress in his cell, Robert thought about everything he had lost. His daughter, his wife, his son, his best friend, his freedom, his reputation, everything. And he wondered if the truth really did set you free. Because right now, all the truth had done was show him exactly how much damage one desperate man could do. 2 weeks after Robert's confession, the FBI finished their investigation. Agent Torres submitted his report to the DA's office. Every single thing Robert had claimed was true. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. James Sullivan was completely innocent. The DA called a press conference. Cameras from every major news outlet filled the room. James stood beside the DA, his lawyer on his other side. He looked different than he had in court. Lighter somehow, like a huge weight had been lifted from his shoulders. After a thorough investigation by the FBI, the DA announced, "We can confirm that James Sullivan is innocent of all charges." Robert Chen has confessed to embezzling approximately $2.3 million from their company and deliberately framing Mr. Sullivan for these crimes. All charges against Mr. Sullivan are being dropped immediately, and his record will be expunged. The reporters shouted questions. James stepped up to the microphone. "I want to thank everyone who believed in me," he said. His voice was steady but emotional. "My wife, my children, my lawyer, and the few friends who stood by me when everyone else thought I was guilty. This has been the hardest year of my life, but knowing the truth is finally out there, that's what matters. Do you forgive Robert Chen?" a reporter shouted. James paused. The room went quiet, waiting for his answer. "I'm still processing everything," he said carefully. "Robert was my best friend. We built a company together. We were like brothers. What he did was wrong. Very wrong. He didn't just steal money. He stole my reputation, my peace of mind, my children's sense of security. That's not something you forgive overnight. Will you be pressing charges?" "The DA is already pressing charges," James said. "Robert will face justice for what he did. As for me, I just want to rebuild my life and clear my name completely." But while James was talking to reporters, something unexpected was happening. The media coverage of Robert's story was growing. News outlets started digging into his background. They found he had been a good man before all this. A devoted father, a hard worker, a friend to many people. They interviewed Sophie's doctors. The treatment she needed was cutting edge, one doctor explained on camera. Her insurance company denied coverage because they considered it experimental. It's a common problem in healthcare. These treatments can save lives, but they're incredibly expensive and insurance won't always pay. They talked to parents who had been in similar situations. A mother in Texas who had sold everything she owned to pay for her son's cancer treatment. A father in Ohio who had started a fundraising campaign online. People who had faced the same impossible choice Robert had faced. "I understand what he did was wrong," one mother said in an interview, "but I also understand the desperation. When your child is dying and you're told there's a treatment that could save them but you can't afford it, you would do anything. Anything." The story sparked a national debate. Was the healthcare system forcing parents into impossible situations? Should experimental treatments be covered by insurance? How far would anyone go to save their child? Robert watched some of this coverage on the small TV in the common area of the jail. He didn't know how to feel about it. He didn't want sympathy. He had done something terrible. He had destroyed his best friend's life. The fact that he had a good reason didn't make it right. His lawyer, Patricia, came to see him with news. "The DA wants to talk about a plea deal," she said. "What kind of deal?" "They're offering 8 years with possibility of parole in 4. Given the charges against you, that's actually very generous. The judge is taking into account your daughter's illness, your lack of prior criminal record, and your voluntary confession. 8 years. Robert would be 50 when he got out. Tom would be 16, almost grown. He would miss his son's entire childhood. What if I don't take the deal?" Robert asked. "Then we go to trial. And honestly, Robert, we would lose. The evidence against you is ironclad. You confessed. You provided proof. A jury would convict you in an hour, and the judge could give you the maximum sentence. 25 years. You would be 67 when you got out. If you got out," Robert thought about it. 8 years versus 25 years. It wasn't really a choice. "There's something else," Patricia said. "James Sullivan wants to make a statement at your sentencing hearing." The judge has approved it. Robert's heart sank. He knew what that meant. James was going to tell the court how Robert's actions had affected him, and the judge would take that into account when deciding his sentence. 3 weeks later, Robert stood in court for his sentencing hearing. The room was packed again. Reporters, curious citizens, and people from both sides of the growing debate about healthcare and desperation. Judge Harrison looked older than she had at James's trial. This case had clearly taken a toll on everyone involved. "Mr. Chen," she said, "you have pleaded guilty to embezzlement, fraud, identity theft, and obstruction of justice. Before I pass sentence, I'm going to hear from several people who have been affected by your actions. Mr. Sullivan, please come forward." James walked to the front of the courtroom. He didn't look at Robert. He faced the judge and began to speak. "Your Honor, what Robert did to me was devastating. I was arrested in front of my children. My 7-year-old daughter watched police handcuff her father and put him in a squad car. She has nightmares about it still." Robert closed his eyes, but he forced himself to open them. He owed it to James to hear this. I lost my job. My reputation was destroyed. People I had known for years crossed the street to avoid talking to me. My wife almost left me. She stood by me, but the stress nearly broke our marriage. My children were bullied at school. One of my son's friends told him, "Your dad is a thief." He was 9 years old. James's voice cracked, but he continued. I spent a year fighting for my freedom. A year of my life consumed by legal battles, by trying to prove I was innocent. I spent our life savings on lawyers. We lost our house. We had to move in with my wife's parents. At night, I would lie awake wondering if I was going to prison for something I didn't do. The courtroom was silent except for James's voice. But here's what I want the court to know. I understand why Robert did what he did. I don't forgive him. I may never forgive him. But I understand. This caught everyone by surprise. Even Robert looked up. Robert and I built a company together. We were best friends for 10 years. I knew Sophie. I watched her grow up. I was at her 3rd birthday party. I taught her how to ride a bike. When she got sick, I saw what it did to Robert and his family. James finally looked at Robert. You should have come to me. When Sophie got diagnosed, when you needed help, you should have knocked on my door. I would have given you everything I had. We could have mortgaged the business. We could have asked our investors for help. We could have started a fundraising campaign. There were options, Robert. You didn't have to do it alone. Tears were streaming down Robert's face. But you were too proud or too scared or too desperate to ask. And I get that. I have children too. If one of them got sick and needed expensive treatment, I don't know what I would do. I want to think I would make better choices than you did. But sitting here today, having been through what you put me through, I'm not sure anymore. James turned back to the judge. Your Honor, what Robert did was wrong. He needs to face consequences. But I'm asking you to consider the full picture. Consider that he lost his daughter. Consider that he voluntarily confessed and cleared my name. Consider that he's not a criminal who was trying to get rich. He was a desperate father who made terrible choices. James walked back to his seat. The judge made some notes. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Judge Harrison asked. To everyone's surprise, a woman stood up in the back of the courtroom. It was Helen, Robert's ex-wife. Your Honor, may I say something? The judge nodded. Helen walked to the front. She looked at Robert for a long moment before speaking. I'm angry at my husband, former husband. The divorce was finalized last week. I'm angry at him for lying to me, for shutting me out, for making these decisions without me. When Sophie got sick, we should have faced it together. Instead, he pushed me away and tried to handle everything himself. She paused, gathering her thoughts. But I also know the man Robert used to be. Before all this, he was a good father, a good husband, a good person. The cancer didn't just destroy Sophie's body. It destroyed our family. It destroyed Robert's mind. Watching your child suffer and knowing you can't help them, it breaks something inside you. Helen's voice was shaking now. I'm not asking you to let him go. What he did was wrong. James and his family suffered because of Robert's choices. But I am asking you to remember that Robert has already lost everything. His daughter is dead. His family is gone. His best friend won't speak to him. He tried to kill himself twice because he couldn't live with what he had done. He's already in prison, Your Honor. He's been in prison since the day Sophie was diagnosed. Helen walked back to her seat. The judge took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes. Mr. Chen, do you have anything you want to say before I pass sentence? Robert stood up. His legs felt weak. Your Honor, I don't have an excuse for what I did. Everyone has given reasons and explanations, but at the end of the day, I made a choice. I chose to steal. I chose to lie. I chose to frame my best friend. Those were my choices, and I have to live with them. His voice was steady now. I did it to save my daughter, but she died anyway. So all the pain I caused, all the lives I destroyed, it was for nothing. I have to live with that. James has to live with what I did to him. His children have to live with it. My son has to live with it. Everyone I hurt has to carry that weight, and it's my fault. Robert looked directly at James. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. It will never be enough. But I am sorry. You were my brother, and I betrayed you in the worst possible way. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that if I could go back and do things differently, I would. I would come to you for help. I would trust you. I would trust us. He turned back to the judge. I'll accept whatever sentence you give me. I deserve to be punished for what I did. I just hope that someday, somehow, some good can come from all this pain." Judge Harrison was quiet for a long time. She looked at her notes. She looked at Robert. She looked at James. "Mr. Chen," she finally said, "you have committed serious crimes. Crimes that hurt not just your victim but his entire family. Under normal circumstances, I would impose a very harsh sentence." Robert held his breath. "However, these are not normal circumstances. Your daughter's illness and death, while not an excuse, provide context for your actions. Your voluntary confession and cooperation with authorities show genuine remorse. The fact that you kept evidence of your crime suggests that some part of you always intended to tell the truth." She put her glasses back on. "I'm going to accept the plea agreement. 8 years in a federal prison, with possibility of parole after 4 years. Additionally, you will be required to make restitution to Mr. Sullivan and the company investors. I understand you have no money now, but any assets you acquire in the future will go toward paying back what you stole." 8 years. It was done. Robert felt his knees buckle and his lawyer caught his arm to steady him. "I also want to say something," the judge continued. "This case has highlighted serious problems in our healthcare system. The fact that a loving father felt he had no choice but to commit crimes to save his child is a tragedy. It's a tragedy that should never happen in this country. I hope this case inspires lawmakers to address these issues so that no other family faces this impossible situation." She banged her gavel. "Court is adjourned. Mr. Chen, you will be transported to begin serving your sentence immediately." As the bailiffs led Robert away, he looked back one more time at James. Their eyes met across the courtroom. And in that moment, something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe understanding. Maybe the first small step toward something that could eventually become forgiveness. Federal prison was different from county jail. Harder, more structured, more dangerous. Robert was sent to a medium security facility 3 hours away from his home. Helen had already told him she wouldn't bring Tom to visit. She thought it was better if their son remembered his father from before, not like this. Robert understood. He didn't argue. He had given up the right to argue about anything when he made his choices 3 years ago. The first few months were the hardest. Learning the rules, both official and unofficial. Keeping his head down. Staying out of trouble. Some of the other inmates asked him what he was in for. When he told them embezzlement and fraud, they mostly lost interest. White-collar criminals weren't exactly respected in prison, but they weren't targets either. They were just boring. Robert was assigned to work in the prison library. It was quiet there. He could lose himself in books, forget for a few hours where he was and what he had done. He started reading everything he could find about computer programming and technology. His skills were years out of date now, but he figured maybe when he got out, he could still do something useful. 6 months into his sentence, he got an unexpected visitor. James. Robert was shocked when the guard called his name for the visiting room. He hadn't put James on his approved visitor list because he didn't think James would ever want to see him again. But apparently James had gone through the paperwork anyway. They sat across from each other, separated by a table and everything that had happened between them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "Why did you come?" Robert finally asked. James looked older. There was more gray in his hair, lines around his eyes. But he also looked healthier than he had at the trial, like he was sleeping better. "I've been working with my therapist," James said, "trying to process everything that happened. The arrest, the trial, your confession, all of it. And she suggested that maybe I needed closure, that maybe we both needed to talk." "I meant what I said in court," Robert said. "I'm sorry for everything." "I know you are," James said, "and I'm working on forgiveness. I'm not there yet. Maybe I'll never be completely there, but I'm trying." James reached into his pocket and pulled out some papers. He slid them across the table. "What's this?" Robert asked. "It's information about a foundation I'm starting. The Sophie Chen Foundation. It's going to help families who need experimental medical treatments but can't afford them. We'll provide grants, help with fundraising, connect people with resources. Everything you should have had access to when Sophie got sick." Robert stared at the papers, his daughter's name in bold letters at the top. He couldn't speak. "I thought a lot about what you said in court," James continued, "about how all the pain was for nothing because Sophie died anyway. But maybe it doesn't have to be for nothing. Maybe we can make sure other families don't face the same impossible choice you did." Tears were running down Robert's face. "I can't believe you would do this." After everything I did to you, Sophie was a good kid, James said simply. She deserved better than what happened to her. And other kids deserve better than our broken healthcare system, so I'm going to do something about it. James stood up to leave. Wait, Robert said. Can I ask you something? How's your family, your kids? James smiled, and it was genuine. They're good. Better now that the trial is over and my name is cleared. My daughter still has nightmares sometimes, but she's in therapy and it's helping. My son is playing soccer again. My wife and I, we're stronger than we were before. Turns out going through hell together either breaks you or makes you stronger. We got lucky. I'm glad, Robert said, and he meant it. There's one more thing, James said. He pulled out another piece of paper. It's a letter. For Tom. For when he's old enough to understand everything that happened. I wrote down my side of the story. What you did, but also why you did it. I want him to know that his father loved him and Sophie more than anything in the world. That you made terrible mistakes, but they came from love, not malice. Robert took the letter with shaking hands. Thank you. You didn't have to do that. I know, James said. But Sophie deserved a father who would fight for her. And Tom deserves to know he had that father. Even if that father made catastrophic choices. After James left, Robert sat in his cell and read the letter over and over. James had written honestly about the pain and betrayal, but he had also written about their friendship, about the Robert he used to know, about how sometimes good people do terrible things when faced with impossible situations. Time passed slowly in prison, but it passed. Robert kept working in the library. He started teaching a coding class to other inmates. Some of them were young guys who had made stupid mistakes and wanted to learn a skill for when they got out. Robert found he was good at teaching, patient, clear. He could break down complex concepts into simple terms. One of his students was a kid named Danny, 23 years old, in for drug dealing. My mom got sick, Danny told Robert one day. Cancer. I started dealing to pay for her treatment. Stupid, I know. Got caught 6 months in. Did the treatment work? Robert asked. Danny shook his head. She died last year. Just like your daughter. All that risk, all that time, and she died anyway. They sat in silence for a moment. Two men who had committed crimes trying to save someone they loved. Two men who had failed. You know what the worst part is? Danny said. I'm not even sorry I tried. If I had to do it over knowing she would die anyway, I think I would still deal. Because at least I tried. At least I fought for her. Robert understood that feeling completely. 2 years into his sentence, Robert got a letter from Helen. It was the first time she had written to him since his sentencing. His hands shook as he opened it. Robert, it began. I've been seeing a therapist too. Everyone in this story has been seeing a therapist, I guess. She's been helping me work through my anger at you. And I think I'm finally at a place where I can tell you this. I forgive you. Robert had to stop reading. He sat on his bunk and cried for the first time since entering prison. The letter continued. I forgive you for lying to me. For shutting me out. For trying to handle Sophie's illness alone. I don't forgive you for what you did to James. That's between you and him. But I forgive you for what you did to me and to our family. I understand now that you were drowning and you didn't know how to ask for help. I wish you had asked. I wish we could have faced it together. But I understand why you didn't. She wrote that Tom was doing well. He was 10 now, playing baseball, getting good grades. He asked about his father sometimes. Helen had been honest with him, age-appropriately. She told him that his father had made some very bad choices trying to save Sophie, and now he had to face consequences for those choices.